Hey and welcome to Shiny Lord 75's first video on Pokemon Origins. As I've said, this is the first in what I hope to be a series of videos explaining some of the more obscure and disturbing origins of Pokemon, such as what they are based off compared to the real world and what might have inspired them. Okay, let's start this off with Paris and Parasect. These two have been kicking around since Generation 1 and are a pair of the gen's more forgettable duo. You might disagree with me, but I thought they didn't stand out as much as some others. However, these two have a very dark and very sinister basis for their design. You will notice they are both grass and bug types and happen to be insects that harbour mushrooms on their body, in what looks like a symbiotic relationship. If you read several of Parasect's Pokédex entries, it will mention how the mushroom it has had as a Paras has since basically taken control of its body, and basically Parasect has no mind of its own anymore, the mushroom controls it. The mushroom in question is in fact you have to forgive me if I don't pronounce this correctly, the Tochikasi mushroom, which I've put on the screen there. And this is part of the Cordyceps species, which I've also put on the screen, which is a real-world fungus. Now, in reality, this mushroom's spores infect certain species of caterpillar larvae, leading them to their deaths and bursting out of their heads before blooming their spores into the air to infect more insects nearby. However, there are other species of this fungus that infect other such creatures, such as ants. And they can be so detrimentally dangerous that they can wipe out whole colonies. In creatures such as the ant, the fungus takes control of the ant's brain, making it climb to the top of the stalk and clamp its jaws to a leaf before bursting out of its body, killing it and releasing its spores. Very pleasant. This cruel twist of nature is remarkably similar to Paris and Parasect, with Paris being the newly infected insect still in control of its mind, whilst Parasect is the latter stage of this horrible infection, with the mushroom that's now completely controlling its mind. The Tochikasi mushroom is referenced specifically for this Pokemon, as it has had real-world uses in medicine. If I remember correctly, in the original anime series of Pokemon, a Parasect used its spores to help create medicinal powers for its owner. The next origin I want to talk about is Magikarp and Gyarados. I remember when I first played through my blue version, I always found it very bizarre as to why the weakest and most pathetic Pokemon in the game would evolve into one of the most desirable at the time. It was like some really weird, ironic twist of fate. I also thought it was very bizarre that how a common carp-like fish evolved into a draconic sea serpent. However, this unusual evolution may be based on the oriental legend of the Dragon Gate, in which a carp that persevered to jump over a waterfall would become a dragon. This legend is normally used to encourage people not to give up and to persevere because the rewards will be great in the end. You can see how this myth would make sense to Magikarp and Gyarados, as Magikarp is a very weak and very feeble Pokemon, and it's not even capable of attacking until it's at least at level 15, and even then, at the very best, it's a burden to train and to use in battle. However, for those trainers that persevered and put in the hard work and pain to raise this pathetic fish, they would be rewarded with the much more desirable and much more powerful Gyarados. Now, what I'm about to say is my personal opinion, but I think Gyarados' unusual flying type comes from this myth as well, as the dragons the carp became are the traditional Chinese dragon, which have serpentine bodies and are able to fly, body shapes very similar to those of Gyarados and even Pokemon such as Rayquaza. You may ask why they didn't just make Gyarados part dragon, and I think the reason they didn't make him dragon was to make the Dratini evolution line more special, as they were the only dragon line at the time, and dragon was a very unique and very rare type at that stage, so I think that's probably why they didn't make Gyarados dragon. They wanted to make Dratini more special. And to finish this video, I thought that since it's snowing very heavily where I am, I'd cover an ice-type Pokemon, Frostlass. Now, Frostlass is an ice and ghost type Pokemon, and can be female only, which is important when considering its legend. Frostlass is based on the Yuki-onna, translated as Snow Woman or Snow Girl from Japanese folklore. The Yuki-onna is in all regards an ice spirit. Now, the following extract is taken from Wikipedia. She sometimes wears a white kimono, but other legends describe her as nude, with only her face and hair standing out against the snow. Despite her inhuman beauty, her eyes can strike terror into mortals. She floats across the snow, leaving no footprints. In fact, some tales say she has no feet, a feature of many Japanese ghosts, and she can transform into a cloud of mist or snow if threatened. Now, the Yuki-onna has been depicted to wear a kimono, which incidentally Frostlass looks to be wearing if you look at its art. The fact that Yukiona floats across the snow and leaves no footprints, as well as the fact that she's a spirit, explains both the reason why Frostlass has no feet and its ghost typing. One of Frostlass's abilities is Snowcloak, which raises evasion in hail, which in itself is taken from the legend that Yukiona can transform into snow and threatened, thereby making her harder to attack. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I have plenty more Pokemon Origins to cover, but if there are any specific ones you guys want, I'll try my best to get around to those, and I hope to see you all soon.